How do you leverage when you don't know if you have leverage? Another way of saying that is, how do you leverage when on the inside you don't even believe that you have leverage? And the answer to that is, you can't. You see, leverage is one of the most crucial and vital components for any human being in any kind of negotiation. Right now, some of the most timely negotiations of this decade, maybe even of this century, are taking place. Specifically, I'm talking about the negotiations between one of the world's superpowers and another one of what is showing itself to be one of the world's superpowers. And interestingly enough, as this negotiation is going on, one of the most interesting things about this negotiation is the key component to the negotiation is leverage. Because the key component to every negotiation, nonetheless, is leverage. Leverage is how a seed becomes a tree. Leverage is how, when someone's buying a house, they put in a deposit, much like a seed, maybe 25% if they're an investor, maybe 5%, 10% if they're buying for their own home purposes. And then they get a mortgage, which is kind of like the tree. Maybe the other 75% if they're an investor, maybe 95%, 90% if they're buying for their own home. Now, nonetheless, the tree is the leverage, but there is no tree without no seed. So this is why leverage is so crucial. This is why leverage is so important, because leverage becomes the fulcrum that can be utilized inside of any negotiation. If you're an individual who's negotiating how you're going to become more wealthy, then the seed you have determines the tree that will be. And ultimately, which is more important, it also determines the fruit that can come from the root. So if you're someone who said to yourself at some point in your life, what leverage do I have? And how do I leverage when I have no leverage? Then what you've actually done is you've actually outlined a belief that you hold to be true, which I don't actually even hold to be true. So that becomes the difficulty in my ability to help you, because the belief that you hold when you ask a question like, how do I leverage when I have no leverage, is a belief that it's possible to have no leverage. And quite simply, because I'm a believer in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 28, which is the verse that basically articulates, let us make man in our image and let them be in our likeness. And those verses go on to say, and let them have dominion over this and over that and every other thing. And it goes on to say, so God created man in his own image, male and female created he him, male and female created he them. So even the ladies have got nowhere to hide, because he was talking to you too. So if my strongest belief is that we're made in the image of God, then my strongest belief naturally is that God's got leverage. And if we're in his likeness, we must have leverage. The challenge we have, however, is that 9 times out of 10, we don't know how to see it. This is the reason why when people often meet me for the first time and they say, hey, Samuel, what do you do? I say, my name's Samuel I Can Win a Kimwin. I help people create consistent and then colossal cash flow using resources and revenues hidden in plain sight. Now, I don't say hidden in plain sight because they're hidden from you. I say hidden in plain sight because you just don't know what to do in order to see what's not hidden from you. And one of the examples I can use to explain this is found in Proverbs chapter 13, verse 23, where it says, there is much food in the tillage of the poor, but there is that is destroyed for lack of judgment. And that's essentially the challenge. And that's essentially the problem. The problem is the lack of judgment. You see, the poor man's biggest problem isn't the lack of money. And the poor man's biggest problem is very often not the lack of opportunity. The poor man's biggest problem, according to Proverbs 13, verse 23, written by Solomon, one of the wisest men of his day. As I believe he literally has the title as the wisest man of his day. He was the one who said the poor man's bigger problem than the lack of money or than a lack of perceived opportunity is actually poor judgment, thus a lack of judgment. And this is how we have to shift the narrative. If we're in a place in our life where you may have started to believe that you have no leverage, and as a result of having no leverage, there's nothing you can do. The reality is there's so much leverage available to you. And the question is just, can you see it? So what I want to do to help you see that leverage is I want to go through 3 steps that you can follow in order for you to see exactly where your leverage lies right now. The first step is take a deep breath. And the reason I'm saying take a deep breath is because something like this can be extremely daunting. And I'm going to expand on the first step, but just take a deep breath and relax. Take a step back. Because very often the reason we are challenged to see what's right in front of you or what's right in front of me is the fact that we're too close to the glass. And when I say too close to the glass, let me give you a visual picture of what I'm talking about. One of the things I've often said to my coaching clients is we can't read the label from inside of the bottle. So sometimes I have clients who are trying to figure out things in their life and things are just tough for them. Like they just see all of the toughness that's around them. And don't get me wrong, there's toughness around them. But if you imagine a bottle or a container and you imagine that bottle or that container has that individual who's trying to fix their life inside of it. And on the outside of that bottle or container is the label. And let's say the outside of that container says Jack Daniels, all right, or Southern Comfort or vodka, right? And let's say there's this little part on that label which says 40% volume. Okay, now if that bottle's full, we already know what's happening. The person in the bottle is most likely going to drown. And not only are they going to drown, they're actually probably going to drown, but first suffer from alcohol poisoning, because 40% volume is a whole lot of volume. That kind of volume would get someone very quickly intoxicated. It will get someone very quickly unable to see the things that are reality. But as I often say, you can't read the label from inside of the bottle. So the value for that person, especially if they're so close up to the glass, and let me just talk about this so close up to the glass idea, because I think this is going to be helpful. Because when we're in the bottle and so close up to the glass, sometimes we're under the delusion that we're not in a bottle at all. We're under the delusion that because we can see through the clear glass, or maybe we can see through the tainted, twisted, colored glass, right? We're seeing the world, maybe clearly, or maybe with some kind of taint on it. But because we're so close to the glass, we don't realize it's glass. So this is part of the problem. See, part of the problem of being in the bottle is what you're in the bottle with, you know, the intoxicant. Part of the problem of being in the bottle is how close how close to the glass you are. And another part of the problem with being in the bottle is just the good old fact that you can't read the label. So it's of value for all of us in our respective bottles to have someone who's not in the bottle to be able to read the label on the bottle and hopefully essentially communicate with us so we can get the best value out of that collaboration and connection. Because from being outside of the bottle, I can see that this is highly toxic. I can see that this is alcoholic. I can see that the bottle is actually full. And it is a very small room for you to actually get to in order to breathe and not drown or suffocate or deal with alcohol poisoning. From outside of the bottle, I can see there's a little label that says 40% volume, and it won't take long before you're believing things that aren't actually reality. That's the power of having someone who's outside of the bottle. And in essence, I think I will say this as well, that's another form of leverage. And what happens a lot of the time in our life is we give over our power of leverage because we believe or perceive that we have no leverage. So the first step is to take back our power. And the way we do that is by stepping back and relaxing and just breathing. And just realizing this fight is worth fighting. So I'm going to work on it. The second thing that you're going to do is a quick overview. Overview of what? Overview of what you're aiming to achieve. Because regardless of what you have around you, regardless of the circumstance that surrounds you, where you're going is going to have to be the strongest lever that's going to pull you. And the only way that can happen is if the vision of the future becomes so much clearer than your observation of anything else. Jim Rohn often used to say that when we see clearly, we take bold steps. And conversely to that is equally true. When we don't see clearly, we take hesitant steps. So in order to take bold steps out of the bottle, in order to take bold steps and step on the throttle, we're going to have to see super clearly. The Bible says it way better. It says in Proverbs 29:18, without a vision, the people perish. So this is the time. It's the time at this second stage to take an overview look at what you desire to achieve. What's the big, bodacious, grandioso goal? What is it that you are desiring to make happen? What does it look like? And if you want to go super ninja, you can ask yourself, what does it smell like? You can ask yourself, when you're sat in the seat of that success, what does it feel like, smell like, look like, or even taste like? Get as deep as you can in the experience of that outcome. Because the deeper you get into that experience, the clearer you'll understand that it's worth it. So the first stage is taking back the power. Take a step back, relax, breathe, and just know the journey's worth fighting for. The second step is to take that overview look, create that vision, because without a vision, the people perish, and get super clear on where you desire to go and why, more importantly, you desire to go. After you've clearly articulated the picture of the vision, don't shortchange yourself. Maybe even just ask that big question that children love to ask their parents, why? And then why? And then why? And maybe try it about 5 times with your 5 respective answers so you can really dig down into that. But here's the third step. After you've made it clear that you're willing to fight, after you've painted the picture of where you're willing to go, ask yourself the audit question. What do I have available to me now that can assist me to go? You don't even need to ask yourself, what do I have that will get me there? Wrong question. And sometimes it's asking the wrong questions that put us on the wrong trajectories to the places and destinations we actually desire to go to. So don't ask yourself the wrong question, and don't strive at this point for a form of perfection. Instead, ask yourself a question so you can just identify a few things to put on your radar for selection. And that simple question to ask in this third stage, which is your audit stage, and you're auditing your current circumstance and surroundings, not auditing the overarching picture and destination. So just ask yourself, what do I have available to me right now that can assist me to go on that journey? Now, what's profound is your answer might be time. One of your answers might be a specific, unique talent. That might be a skill set. That might be a tool set. That might even be a mindset. And sometimes your answer might be a specific form of a treasure. And the reality is, it doesn't matter which of these you answer. It doesn't matter if there's an amalgamation of all three that you answer. What matters is that you answer. Because the moment you answer, you've broken the chain of believing that you've got nothing to leverage with. And that audit, that short 3-step process and that final layer of the audit is what positions you to be in the best shot at your best life. And the reason that is because now on your journey, you're starting to see what you can utilize to be who you desire to be. And let's just imagine if you started, maybe at the end of this video or maybe at the end of some process, believing that you can't leverage because you have no leverage. But you've gone through this process and you're now starting to see that you've got some time that you can invest. You're now starting to see that you've got a specific skill set, tool set, or mindset that you can invest. And you're now starting to see that there's a specific kind of treasure you've got that you can invest. Without further ado, I submit to you that you are actually blessed. And this is the life we're living. We're living in a world where so many have given up because they're starting a journey believing that they've already failed. And my question to you is, what would happen if that one little thing changed? Not if you were given more, not if it was easier, and not even if someone else did it for you, but just what if you started the race without believing that you've already failed? What impact would that have on your ability to leverage? What impact would that have on your ability to go further, faster for your future? What impact would that have on your opportunity to actually leave a legacy for your loved ones, for the next generation, for your community, for the people you collaborate with, for your connections? I strongly believe that if we can just shift that idea, the idea that we've already lost before we start, then we'll be reintroduced to that beautiful art. And that art, my friend, is called leverage. So with that being said, as I usually say, please remember that small keys open big doors, because that in and of itself is leverage for sure. Samuel I Can Win. I'm signing out. I'll see you on the video tomorrow. If you got value, let me know in the comments below. Good day, God bless. I'll see you on another one.